Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? It is Friday, August 2nd, and we've got a very special guest in the house tonight. I hope you guys have got pen and paper and notes handy. It's going to be a drink from the fire hose, as always. For those of you that have not been living under a rock, James Roguski is probably the preeminent bloodhound on the trail of the gobbledygook and the UNWHO word salad in tracking down and chasing the sense and the stories out of it. So we're going to hear from James here in just 1 minute. But you guys, I'm going to hammer this over and over and over every day. I'm going to be talking about a couple of the platforms that we are consistently available on tonight. Surprise, surprise, we're able to stream on 2 Facebook platforms. We are on our YouTube backup channel, X, Instagram, Rumble, and Wimkin. So you guys are going to want to make sure that you help get James's information out to the rest of the world. A good place to start is on whatsupcanada.org, where you can keep track of everything reliably. We just rebuilt and relaunched the site, and as always, the day after a show, the next morning, everything shows up with all of the links. Everything that we reference in the show is available on Substack. So that's an important one. I want to make sure to drive into people's home, whatsupcanada.org, and also lgm.news. Just kind of getting refired up with this one as well, and we're starting to invite and get some common sense, authentic journalists, podcasters lined up, getting back on that platform. And last night we had a bit of a glitch with the show last night, and it didn't appear on the main channel. It actually was still streamed live, but I know a whole bunch of you folks missed it. But it is pinned to the top of the What's Up Canada Rumble page, and I want to encourage everybody to make sure, double check that your little bell icon that is ticked so that you're getting notifications. We've still got a long ways to go, but we've got just about 6,000 of you guys over there. And an update from last night's show: David Charlambo has rescheduled, so we will have David next Wednesday for our guest. Special Wednesday guest will be David, and this is going to be potentially life-changing conversation, getting to know David and how he can help folks out. And this is also the last call of Tactical Civics 101, our introductory event tomorrow. RSVP only, guys. It won't be streamed, it won't be live, won't be recorded. Well, it'll be recorded for myself for the notes, but I'll drop the link in the chat here in just a minute. And without further ado, I've kept the star waiting far too long. James, it's so good to have you back. Thanks for nailing down some time to come and chat with us here again and give us an update on what the hell is going on, because it seems like you're the only fluent translator in WHOEs and
yeah, translating their brand of English to English so that people can actually understand it. Oh my goodness, there are so many things to talk about. So let me just put it this way. I've been digging into the WHO rabbit hole for 2.5 years, just about now. And every time I get down to the bottom of it, what I actually find is the PCR rabbit hole. Now, for those people who really have been living under a rock, PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. And I'm just going to call it the way I see it. People can disagree if they want. It's BS. The idea that this laboratory process, which is, a very valuable tool for people in the science field, working in laboratories, doing various things, it is absolutely not a test. And so anytime I catch myself or I catch anybody else say the phrase PCR test, I try to put the brakes on, and you got to put the air quotes, or you got to say so-called test. And so my goal, even though, many people have known about this for quite some time, I've actually known about this BS for about 30 years. This all started with HIV and AIDS, and then SARS, and then swine flu and Zika and everything else in between, certainly COVID. I learned a long time ago that testing, whether it's for COVID-19 or HIV or mammograms or prostate specific antigen PSA tests for men or cholesterol or high blood pressure or sugar or anything else under the sun, those are actually customer acquisition tools for the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. You take a healthy person and you say, oh, you've got to come in for your yearly checkup.
Profit and cure, right?
Right? You got to be tested for all these many things. If you test enough people for enough things, I remember 40 years ago, before I ever even had a clue about any health related something, there was a scandal in Rhode Island. I was living in Rhode Island at the time, that this big, cancer biopsy testing laboratory had made a huge mistake, and like hundreds of women had been wrongly, inaccurately diagnosed, and it was, a big fiasco. Um, Let me see if I can put it in super plain English. If you have a test that's 99% accurate, that sounds, pretty good. If you were taking a test in school, 99, pretty high grade. But if I'll just use Canada as an example. Okay. If you test 40 million Canadians and it's got a 99% accuracy rate, that means it's wrong 1% of the time. Off the top of my head, I think that's 400,000 people.
Mhm.
Okay. That's a pandemic.
Right. There's a couple of comments here, and I want to just kind of
Sure.
not let people get too anxious, but I see Carrie's name coming up and the PCR test information coming up. Guys, hold on to your socks. First and foremost, I got to bring this up, James. Your Substack. We're going to, I guarantee you, folks out there, be talking exactly about what you guys know. So this is going to be great. I'm glad you guys are informed. We're going to start tonight, though, kind of with the equitable access to pandemic-related products, because this is, for me, every time I get you on here, James, it's as much a learning thing for me as it is for the people out there. And understanding for me, about the equity and what they're actually fighting for and the money behind all of this is kind of where my brain left off the last time we talked in understanding. So, but for everybody
go ahead, click on that article, and we'll go down that wing of the rabbit hole.
I already got it.
Okay. And so to temporarily stop talking about Carrie Mullis and the PCR test, because that's where this ends up leading.
Mm-hmm.
Why was the WHO overseeing and conducting negotiations for amendments to the international health regulations and a new pandemic treaty? What was the reason that these negotiations were and are and will continue to be ongoing? Okay, so a little tiny summary. The international health regulations were amended on June 1st of this year, a couple of months ago now. And a lot of people got misinformation, and there's a lot of really bad analyses about those negotiations. People were partying like we beat the WHO, and at the last minute, not quite overtime, but literally at the bewitching hour, the meeting, the 77th World Health Assembly, was scheduled to end, before midnight on June 1st. And around 9 p.m., they adopted amendments to the international health regulations that got the nations that started these negotiations got more than they asked for. And a lot of people presented that as a victory. And I'm still, befuddled as to how people can be so confused. Why were those negotiations happening? Well, it's basically because what the people associated with big pharma and the WHO learned from the last 4.5, 5 years is completely, totally different from what I learned and what I think you and your audience probably learned. I learned that there was a lot of BS, right? The PCR is not a test, so it created a case-demic. Wearing masks do not protect people from respiratory problem, whether or not that was the cause or what of what was going on. Wearing a mask actually harms your lungs. It keeps everything trapped in. Now, it might be good for trapping carbon dioxide in your lungs so you don't, overheat the atmosphere. I'm joking. But, a mask has no health benefit at all. It's a horrific idea.
So
Drugs.
I'd like to chime in on that point specifically for a minute, only because it's actually something that I have the credentials to speak on. I spent 15 years, James, as an industrial breathing air specialist. Had I once, ever in my career of making sure that everybody went home alive, had I ever once sent anybody into a workspace in that time with that breathing air concoction that you have to suffer through in a mask, I would have been so deeply buried in the jail and criminal negligence system, it would have been unbelievable. So when they came out with that, my head exploded.
I hear you. I have a whole web page dedicated to that. It's called masksharade.com. So it's just another article on my Substack. But to not get distracted down that wing of the rabbit hole, okay? The testing, the masks, the drugs like remdesivir, and the treatments like ventilation and so forth, even oxygen, high flow oxygen, not to even begin to mention what I refuse to call vaccines, but the injectable biological weapons that have caused so much harm and problems around the world. Absolutely all of that, including the lockdowns and the social distancing and any of the quarantine or isolation, all that sort of stuff, was all an abomination. Now, in 2.5 years of reading as many of the documents from the WHO as I possibly could and watching, many, nearly all of their meetings, not one word was ever written or spoken in alignment with what we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes. What they learned was that big pharma was not big enough. And you just go, how could that possibly be what they learned? Well, if you think about it, they had manufacturing and distribution and logistics problems. And if you go back to my Substack, there's actually, I'm gonna make you dig a little bit for a map on a previous article, because man, does it really nail it. If you can go back to the archive and go down until you see WTFO. You might have to see more. Go to WTFO. It's about a month ago or so. There you go. WTFU, I mean. Okay. Scroll down. This is the independent panel until you see a map. The independent panel is the group. There you go. You can maybe blow those up and we'll look at them separately. The independent panel is the group that started these negotiations and the idea that they should have a framework convention to oversee equitable access to pandemic-related products. Now, what this map shows you, and it pops out pretty well, that Africa, substantially lower percentage of the people in Africa got jabbed. I think a lot of people know that, right? Other nations, maybe Eastern Europe, a little bit in the Middle East, and Pakistan and Afghanistan, whatever else it is that we might be looking at there. And I don't know if that's Papua New Guinea, but China and Canada and the United States and Europe, and this is December 2022, after a year, or I should say 2 years of jabbing. Okay, now if you close that and try to remember it, and then go back down to the next map and blow that one up, this is where manufacturing of the jabs occurred. And you can see there's a big empty space in the Middle East and in Africa. So
Oh,
surprise, Surprisingly, Argentina is on the list, but the United States, Cuba, United Kingdom, Germany, Europe in general, Russia, China, India, they all had manufacturing capability. So the problem that they had was, since jabs were not manufactured in Africa, it was a logistical nightmare to manufacture them someplace else and get them into the Kalahari or the Congo jungle, or wherever it may be. And what they're addressing with these negotiations is they want to increase the geographical distribution of the manufacturing of mRNA jabs and all of these other drugs and other products. So the negotiations are not about mandates or lockdowns or whatever. This is just, to steal a phrase from Ross Perot. I don't know. I'm going to date myself here. It's going to be a giant sucking sound of manufacturing capacity moving to impoverished nations, because it's really hard to mandate a jab if you don't have a whole bunch of them on the shelf ready to inject to people. And so the misunderstanding that almost everyone has been dealing with, this map and the previous one, I think, show it better than anything. The nations who weren't able to profit from manufacturing and coercing their people to get jabbed, they felt like they missed out. They didn't have equitable access to the corruption. And that's what these negotiations are really all about.
And this is what baffles me, is because it's like the South American and the African nations are fighting. They want more. They want more. But it's the profit model that they want from the manufacturing that they want. And the problem that they've created here now is, anywhere where these green spots don't exist, they don't have a suddenly expiring problem, which kind of creates a much bigger problem for us wherever any of these big green spots are, is that, now population density issues are going to really start being a problem if they don't get some job manufacturing in here really, really quickly. Now, am I batshit cray for thinking that this way?
There's a multitude of reasons going on here. But, I've dubbed what they're trying to do the new OPEC. It's not the oil producing and exporting countries. It's the Organization of Pandemic Emergency Corporations. There's a lot of money to be made by manufacturing products that you can try to coerce people to use and have their government pay for. The profit margins are, out through the roof.
Well, I think most people here have seen the TED Talk with Mr. Gates saying, if you show them the path to the money, they will come. They'll do it.
If we go back to the article that we were first looking at, let's go all the way back up to James Roguski and the archive. And if you scroll down on here, this is just a press release from the WHO. And I couldn't believe my, I don't know, luck is maybe not the right word, but there's so many phrases on here that just lay it out with great clarity. I'll just read one. The technology, materials, and expertise will be shared with other manufacturing partners, aiding the acceleration of the development of H5N1 vaccine candidates. Okay. Share the information, build out the manufacturing base, share the profits, get ready for a problem that doesn't even really exist at this point in time, but it will, because there's money to be made, whether or not there is a problem. And so all of this ends up going all the way back down to, well, how do they trick people into believing that they need a jab in the first place? Well, if it sounded like at least a handful of people in your audience were, quite aware of Kerry Mullis and his statements that we'll go here next if you wish. This was just something that I was in a conversation with somebody, and they mentioned the Genocide Convention Implementation Act of 1987 in the United States. That's a bill that was passed into law. And I triggered my curiosity, so I went looking for it. And who was the Senate sponsor other than, at the time, Senator Joe Biden? And
Wow.
it essentially makes it a crime, to commit genocide. Now, I avoided the issue of other genocides going on in the Middle East, and he's also very much important in sticking needles in people's arms. And so if you scroll down, there's a handful of things that I highlighted in here that this is the law in the United States. Down a little further, there's a handful of things that define it. Did anything happen? Oh, you went right past it. They're in bold there. Number A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Did anything happen in the United States that killed a lot of people, caused serious bodily injury, permanent impairment of mental facilities, subjects the conditions to subjects the group to conditions of life that are intended to cause the physical destruction of the group, impose measures intended to prevent births within the group, or then also deals with children. It's just astonishing. I don't think it's exactly technically irony. It's more hypocrisy. He was one of the. He was the sponsor. He wasn't the one who pushed the bill. It was actually known as the William Proxmire Act, because Proxmire really pushed hard for it. But he was the Senate sponsor.
Yeah, that it didn't happen without putting his name on it. And how much was the cut for the big guy on that one? I think that's a question that needs to have a hearing, in my opinion. So this was kind of significant to me, and why I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, because we know about the sheer level of hypocrisy in the Democrat Party. All of a sudden, Joe's not capable of running again, but a week before, Kamala was, oh yeah, he's good to go around. We support him. So the level of hypocrisy has been absolutely absurd. But so that's a whole other story. But that's an interesting article, I think, that Americans really should be aware of and maybe start talking about as well. So thanks for touching on that one. But now to what it seems like a lot of people understand, and what we keep alluding to and coming back to. And I think that this kind of ties into some stuff that you're working on for down the road. So the floor is yours, my friend. Let's start here now.
Well, this particular article is actually, in my mind, in honoring Carrie Mullis, but it's also a teaser and like a trailer for what's coming. Okay, because Wednesday, August 7th, as we're recording this on Friday the 2nd, so 5 days from now, is the actual 5th anniversary of Carrie Mullis's passing. And I am working, and had been working quietly in the background for almost a month now, on just a monster article. It's turning into a documentary, and it's also a notice and statement of facts, where there is a lot of evidence from official sources. It's not me saying it. It's not you or some other person who's got a show or a blog or a webcast or anything like that. What I've been collecting are court cases, government documents from the WHO, the FDA, the CDC, the Canadian government, Singapore, UK, so forth and so on, and peer-reviewed journal articles and the like, saying very clearly that, essentially what Carrie Mullis said, if you want to scroll down just a little bit, using the PCR as a diagnostic tool is bullshit. It is not a diagnostic tool. It
Yep.
doesn't tell people whether or not there is a virus in their system. And let me get down into the weeds a little bit. In the PCR process, the very first thing that has to happen, very especially with an RNA quote unquote virus, is they have to destroy whatever might be encapsulating the genetic material. You can't duplicate genetic material if it's all wrapped up in a capsid. And so the first step in the process is to destroy any intact pathogens. It's impossible. It's categorically, absolutely, completely, and totally impossible for the PCR process to determine whether or not there was an intact viral particle found in the person, because the step number one in the process is to destroy whatever the hell is there to get at the genetic material.
It's as simple as a cartoon. You know, they gave us this round spiky thing that attaches to the outside of the cell. Well, how can it attach to that if it isn't there?
And so it this PCR process that is presented as a diagnostic test is completely and totally fraudulent. Kerry Mullis started talking about this 30 years ago with AIDS and HIV. They utilized it towards the end of the 90s with that. They have utilized it with swine flu and bird flu and Zika and the first SARS and obviously with COVID. And now they're using this PCR process, in poultry operations, on dairy farms, checking milk. They actually do samples. They take little samples from wastewater treatment plants, looking for the latest and greatest polio or whatever it might be. And it's all utilized in a manner that is fraudulent.
It's interesting because I'm seeing this ramping up of the radical left lieutenants screaming about the cancellation of wastewater testing for COVID, just the same time as the mask mandates are starting to come back. The same time where Bonnie Crombie makes everybody cheer. Oh, she's ending the COVID mandates. Well, she's not ending anything. All she did was rewrite them. So all of this absurdity and charade, and you kind of touched on it there, where they what some of the people in the audience are waiting for, that the shoe to drop on is the using it on the birds and the
Mhm.
cattle farms. And I've been calling it the buzzard bug scam since they first started to seed the media verse with this whole avian whatever it is that you want to call it. I don't have the words for it, but I think that that's a direct correlation to exactly what we're talking about here with this testing. Am I mistaken?
Oh no, you're on target. The CDC has a page dedicated to wastewater surveillance. They have a page dedicated to feline bird flu. And so you have to be prepared that they're coming for your companion animals, for your pets. If if you could envision, the dystopian world that they want to create, if your pet needs a license, many people have licenses for their dogs in many jurisdictions. Well, if they say, "Oh, we can't give you a license unless you get this, that, or the other test, or this, that, or the other injection," um, are they going to confiscate your pet because you didn't allow them to use a fraudulent test to determine whether or not your beloved pet is safe, is contagious? The funny part about ivermectin and people saying how it was horse paste, or whatever they wanted to call it. Well, the coronavirus vaccine started out as a vaccine for dogs. So how come billions of people around the world took a dog vaccine?
Well, this is what makes it so insidious and evil and diabolical, James. In Ali's dad, you're right. Fakery, sleight of hand. Now they have gotten us to the point where nobody's questioning what the test qualifications are. It's just the test is done, and your cat now has bird flu, and your birds now have this bug, and now you got to cull your herd of cattle and sheep and goats because of this sleight of hand that there's nothing there. It's completely arbitrary. They can make it up as they go, and we're not questioning that. We're watching the sparrows and the robins fly around, but they got to take away the chickens with the eggs that we can eat.
So let's bring down the share and just have the two of us talking here. What I'm working on and what I plan to publish on the 5th anniversary of Carrie Mullis's passing is a collection of evidence that is not me, not other activists, but court cases, government documents, peer-reviewed journals that just very clearly say that this is not a diagnostic test. And there are many people who've asked me, I tell my friends what, I've come to know, other people telling me that they are talking to their friends. And a lot of times their friends will say, well, where'd you get your facts? Well, I'm putting together a very simple document that for those people who are aware of the difference between the legal profession, the law society, the bar association, the typical legal jargon. What I'm putting together is what a research assistant would do for any law firm, researching, the evidence of the case. For people who realize, how that game is different than the idea of common law or natural law or admiralty law, UCC, commercial code. All of this information is being put together in a presentation where it can be presented as a notice informing any government official, where you send this to them and you say, look, these are the facts of what's going on with this PCR process. I'm notifying you of these facts. You got 30 days to refute, each and every one of these. Otherwise, I'll take your silence as consent or assent that you agree that this is all bullshit. So don't you dare come at me trying to test me or my family or my pets or my livestock or whatever it may be, because the facts are not behind you. And so what I'm working to put out there is so that while not everybody, is going to want to know every tiny little detail about it, the facts are on our side. Now, I understand completely that when you're dealing with people who have a religious fervor and they don't care about facts because they believe what they believe. I'm not talking about trying to convince, people who are following the religion of scientism. Okay. This is just simple facts that would stand up in a court of law, would stand up in, any common law or natural law setting. But it's our job to notify anyone who thinks they have authority over us to the facts of the case. So people can preemptively submit this information, and it's much easier to push forth your position, state your position, and make it so that the officials' silence is their consent. And they are not going to be able to refute the facts of the case. And that leads me to something that definitely want to talk to your Canadian audience about. People may already know about this. It's not like breaking news, but it's in the last month or so. There was a,
To that, I kind of want to talk for a second on some of the things that you said there and reassure people. And this is an overwhelmingly the feeling that people have is that they don't care about facts. They're all corrupt. At the end of the day, part of that is it's understandable that people feel this way, but what they don't take into account, or is hard to take into account or understand, is the wheels of the justice system move slower than the slowest snail on earth, and it takes a very long time for America or Canada to actually expedite justice. I think America is actually better at that probably than Canada is. They obfuscate very much here, and we know all of this, but there's been a whole bunch of victories in both places, and in fact all over the world, that are really starting to change the landscape of the discussion. So this is why I think it's incredibly timely that you're assembling this, James, and so people make sure that you get subscribed on James's Substack, because this is going to be important moving forward. Even here right now in Canada, we're starting to see mass tort suits, class action suits, because we've made it this far down the process, and it's a long, drawn out recycling process to get to that. And the other part of that is that, notice, and this is the last thing I want to touch on with that, is that was what is enabling some of the cases right now to be successful. When we were working on, early on, the notices of liability, and early on in all of this, a lot of that, the ones that were done correctly and the process was done correctly, now they are coming into the weight of themselves having merit, and people expected those to be instant remedy at the time, and they were not. They were sorely disappointed. And now they're kind of stuck in, and they've embraced the despair of it. Now is the time to be excited. Now is the time to take those things that, James, that you're assembling, and you're going to publish next week on the anniversary. Those are weapons now, that more so than they would have been a year ago.
And there have been successes, and so I want to talk about one very specifically. It's essentially the King versus Fernando. A woman, last name Fernando. Her name is not Melanie, Melanie, I believe it is. She was traveling and was given a ticket because she did not allow them to stick something up her nose halfway into her brain. And she fought the case, went before a justice of the peace, who I think it was a travesty of justice, and she was convicted. So she did not get her fine removed. I believe, I don't know people personally. I've heard this and had people respond to me, about this. Many people were in a similar situation where they got some kind of ticket like that, and unfortunately, they didn't fight it. They opted for a lower payment.
Fine reduced, make it go away.
And so, I understand, the reality of that. But Fernando, Melanie Fernando, fought the good fight, and it took a while. This took a couple of years, and ultimately, she got the ticket for rejecting, not allowing anybody to stick something up her nose while she was traveling. She, I believe, had been vaccinated, so really makes the case ridiculous. Clearly shows that the vaccine was not a vaccine. It didn't work if they still need to be tested. What's the whole point of that? She lost the original court before Justice of the Peace, but appealed it within 30 days, that ruling. And then it took quite some time to have the second case. And her point was very well crafted. She had some, legal help, not from a lawyer, but from an independent person. And so I think you said you had a chance to talk to Christopher Weisdorf.
Christopher Weisdorf, yeah.
Encourage you to maybe have him on and talk about it further. He certainly knows more about it than I do. But and I had a chance to have a good long conversation with him yesterday. The case hinged upon, of all things, the Quarantine Act. And the Quarantine Act says very clearly that no one can be required to have something inserted in their body. Now, that's, Section 14 of the Quarantine Act. And the judge saw the, irrefutable logic. It's a matter of law. And See, here's the point. It doesn't work to argue the wrong argument. This wasn't about the Bill of Rights. It wasn't about the Charter of Rights. It was about a statute that was clearly being violated. And the ruling by the Justice of the Peace was clearly wrong. So, what Chris Weisdorf was smart enough to recognize is that they needed to ask the Ontario court, the judge, for something that that judge was empowered to do, which was to overturn a wrong ruling in an inferior court that he has power over. They fought the good fight and they won. And this is the whole point. There are a lot of people, and I can talk about the United States a little bit more because I'm from California, and I understand the mistakes that a lot of people make. They like to point to the Constitution, they like to point to the Bill of Rights, and they say, I have the right to do this and I have the right to do that. That's all fine and nice, but ultimately those rights have to be written into statute or regulations. And if you think someone has done something wrong, if you've been harmed, you have to find the statute that makes that action a crime. And this is where everybody gets lazy. And then they meet with defeat, because if you're working in the legal system, the bar, system, the law society, if you don't understand their rules, and I got to give credit where credit is due, Chris Weisdorf, knew the rules. He fought the proper battle and helped Melanie Fernando win her case. If you go in and you argue the wrong argument, you bring a constitutional argument to a statutory court, you're going to lose every time because you just don't know the rules of the game.
That was
Now,
a big part of how all of this, why it's taken so long to get to this point is, when you start to add up all of the people that were wrong and got out of it either which way or didn't get out of it. There was so many people were using the wrong language in the wrong jurisdiction, and then being angry at being defeated, and using documents like the the Charter of Rights and Freedoms didn't apply, and where or they took it, so they fought it and they lost, but they didn't appeal it and take it to a higher jurisdiction with the correct language in that jurisdiction. So hats off to Christopher for having the knowledge to be able to do exactly that. Has now set a precedent that changes the whole game, and didn't take billions of dollars to do, and a team of 45 high-powered lawyers
and tens of thousands of dollars. And so the same idea has applied to the negotiations with the WHO. There was an enormous amount of misinformation, fear-mongering, hype beyond belief. Oh, the WHO is trying to take over the healthcare of your country. They're trying to take over your national sovereignty. They're trying to, institute and mandate lockdowns and jabs and all that sort of stuff. That's not what they were doing ever. What they ultimately adopted on June 1st, amendments to the international health regulations, 9 p.m. on Saturday, June 1st, after everybody was done partying, that they thought they won, but we got our butts whooped. They made a number of changes, but I'll talk just about two of them. One of them was a coordinated financial mechanism. They set up within the World Health Assembly a new section of the bureaucracy to help make the money flow. Oh, if anybody around the world wants to make pandemic-related products, go talk to the coordinating financial mechanism. They'll hook you up. I'll just make one tweak to the title of our video today. It's COVID and corruption. this is good old fashioned crony capitalism, good old fashioned corruption. Um, I don't see anybody making any communes anywhere. They're just trying to make as much money as they possibly can. But the other change that they made in the amendments, and I'm sure everybody missed it, because it was just one word change in Annex 1 of the International Health Regulations. Got to give you a little tiny bit of history, and I know we're coming up on time. I'll try to condense it. All the way back in 1969, when they started the International Health Regulations, the idea was if someone is traveling and they end up at an airport or a seaport or border crossing, hey, if they've got leprosy or smallpox or something, you might want to stop them at the border and get them some help. Well, in 2005, they say, well, let's go one better. And so when they adopted amendments in 2005, they added in the idea of surveillance and essentially said, well, don't wait until somebody's traveling and they're at the border. If someone is ill and they show up in the hospital, let the WHO know if something unusual is going on in your healthcare system. If there's an outbreak, if there's an increase in some ailment or something. So the surveillance is not cameras and tracking people and that sort of thing. It's surveillance of your health data. Well, they added a word to surveillance, and it's now preventive surveillance.
Oh, great.
Okay, so I can tell you get it right now. What that means is go looking for trouble. Go test your poultry operations, your dairy farm, your milk, your dog, your cat, your veterinarians, stool samples. People, whenever you can, stick a swab up their nose and send in a sample. Go looking for trouble. That what they're essentially looking for are pathogens with pandemic potential. Not a pandemic, not even an illness or a disease, just, an identification of a tiny little segment of a pathogen's genetic information so they can say, looky, what we found. And then if they manage to continue the negotiations with the treaty, which they are still working on, it was not defeated. A lot of people misrepresented what happened. They met a couple of weeks ago in July 16th and 17th. They're going to be meeting in September for 2 weeks. They're going to be meeting in November for 2 weeks. The independent panel, the group with the map, right? They have already said that they are on a war footing to end vaccine apartheid. They want to get the treaty signed off on before the Biden administration goes bye-bye if the elections go a different way. And in January, the United States has a new administration. They have clearly stated that they know that the Biden administration is likely to sign more so than a different administration.
So I gotta clarify this because my brain is kind of on glitch mode with this. So what I'm hearing out of this is, Sally down the street has an unauthorized chicken, and in the current conditions of potential buzzard bug running rampant, anybody on the block now must be screened and tested preventatively to make sure. And if you don't comply, you are now a danger to the state, which is where Bill Gates is at right now, trying to negotiate arrest warrants for the anti-jabbers. Does that kind of
that's a tiny little piece of it. I mean, I'll give you a little tiny personal story. There's a couple of neighborhood cats who police our neighborhood. They hang out in our yard. They, drink water from our faucet. They, sit on our bench and enjoy life, here in Glendale, California. One of the pair is an indoor-outdoor cat from a neighbor up the street, and the other one just appears to be, our neighborhood cat. Well, if your cat went down the street to your neighbor's chicken coop and was just hanging out and breathed in some chicken poop, and had to go to the vet and got tested, they could easily test positive for a molecule of something that might be found in a chicken coop. Okay. And, then the dystopian control mechanism kicks into gear. Now, I'm one for not being fear mongering and manifesting, the horror stories that everybody wants to talk about. I'm more about, look, take preemptive action. Take this information. I'm going to be publishing it on Wednesday, and notify all of your local health authorities. Notify all of your veterinarians. Notify your doctor. Send this document. It's a PDF. You can email to everybody. If you really want to get serious, you send them a certified letter, return receipt, so you know that they got the information. Now you've got evidence that you told them that that using the PCR to try to trick you into believing that your animals or you or your family or your neighbors are ill, that you've provided them with the evidence that is bullshit. We're not having it.
Cover your bases and make it evidentiary. I love the fact that you added veterinarians in there, in making it documentable. Don't just send them an email. Make sure you've got evidence that so they can no longer pretend that they did not know, because that's the important part of it all is, and that was what we tried to tell people right from when this first started with the notice of liability. Don't expect anything. The only thing that it will do is down the road, it will confirm that they were informed. So they have no ability to say they didn't know or they weren't informed. That is
at this point, it's not quite a notice of liability, because
it's in the same
harm hasn't happened. It's a notification of fact, a notification and statement of fact. Okay. And part of it is just educational. The reality of it is, the agricultural inspector who's told to go to Joe's farm or Joel's poultry operation, or, go check the milk at the dairy farm or take a sample out of the septic system. They're just doing they're not even thinking about this. They're just doing their job, doing what they're told, not really giving it any deep thought. It's our job to say to them, do you know what this really is? Do you know that this that you're doing is a part of the scam? This is not a diagnostic test, period. Don't believe me. Here's a court case. Here's another one. Here's, Canadian government saying it's not a diagnostic. Okay. These organizations, it's really interesting, and maybe we'll get, wrapping it up on this one. As far as I have been able to find so far, I'm sure there's probably an exception out there, all of the official government agencies have covered their butt. They have in their documentation, oh, no. This is not a diagnostic. It has, false positives and all that sort of thing. Only the WHO, still to this day, in their paperwork, in their documentation, says if you've got a positive PCR test result, and I use that phrase loosely, it's not a test, then that's a case. Everyone else in their official paperwork says, no, you got to have symptoms, you got to have, whatever it is. And so the beauty of all of that is the government documents support what we're saying. So they're going to have to argue with themselves, because they are the ones saying what I've collected that I'm telling everyone else that you need to say to people who just haven't gotten the memo.
It's such a evil, diabolical play on words that they use all the time, and it's one that really sticks in my craw, and I don't think that we really get it. Is this whole international rules based order that they're implementing on us is not an international law based order. And when we apply the law correctly and accurately, this is how we beat the rules, because they make up the rules as they go with whomever is going to be the most compliant and wants, and and the cheapest cronyism, and wherever they can get create the line of profit to keep the charade going. So it's that rule versus law. Don't get into the squabbling and the weeds of the word salad. Apply knowledge, information, documentation, and law to the process, and get rid of the deception.
Well, if you're dealing with a policy man or someone who is enforcing the law, it's pretty easy to ask them to point out the law if that's what they're supposedly enforcing. But more often than not, they're just talking about policy.
Right.
And that's not anything that you're obligated, to obey. If there is a law that is properly formed, you may very well be surprised, like Melanie Fernando knew, right? Um, the law was actually on her side. She
Absolutely.
she knew her rights. She knew the limits of the authority of the officials who were, asking her to subject herself voluntarily to an invasive test. And she knew that she didn't have to. She said as much. The first justice, the people at the moment did not force her to undergo that treatment, but they wrote her a ticket, and the justice of the peace made a mistake. Honestly, probably should be fired if you can't understand, how to apply the law in a given case. But on appeal, the higher court saw the mistake and corrected it. Boy, yeah, there's a lot of corruption all around. But when
That's
when smart people argue and stand in support of their rights, um, anybody who's a defeatist and say, "Oh, the government doesn't care. There's nothing you can do." Well, you got to know what you're doing, and you'll be surprised if you wise up, if you get informed, if we all stand together. And even if you don't have poultry or dairy cattle or any other livestock, go reach out to the closest agricultural inspector wherever you may be, and push this forward on behalf of other people in your community. It's not going to affect you, right? They're not coming for your poultry operation. But if you find who the person is who's going to be going, to do that testing of the sewage treatment plant, or your veterinarian, even if you don't have any pets, go reach out to the local veterinarian and share this information with them.
do they know?
Raise their awareness so that they know somebody's watching them.
100%. Well, definitely another drink from the fire hose, James. Everything making a whole lot more sense, and to be inspiring with knowledge, and understanding, like things are not going well for these guys that abuse the systems, and Trudeau desperately trying to get amnesty out of some of these kinds of things. I think the dogs are starting to nip at their heels a whole lot more, and the more educated and empowered that we become throughout all of this, and understanding the words and using them correctly, is making an absolutely astronomical difference in this information war, because that's absolutely what it is. And getting frustrated with it and getting beat by it, that doesn't help anybody. But you keep it up, and you keep going for us all. I'm incredibly grateful and humble for that we get the opportunity to have you on here from time to time and keep us updated.
Well, one last thing, if I may.
The article that you're talking about, people in the chat were asking, where can they get it? Where can they get it? Well, get caught up on some of James's stuff first, and it's right there front and center. And on Wednesdays when you're going to be delivering this next one, correct?
Couple of things. I always like to give my phone number. So if people are chomping at the bit for the information, give me a phone call. And what I'm looking for, I've still got 4 or 5 days to work on this. I still got a documentary to finish, and tightening everything up. Give me a phone call at 310 310-619-3055. I'm in California, 310-619-3055. The number's on every one of my articles. If it's a cost issue, I'll call you back. Don't worry about that. I've got unlimited calling to Canada. Made a lot of friends in Canada. Happy to pass on the draft version of all of this information. Love to get other people to put their eyeballs on it and make suggestions in this last couple of days before I actually publish it. So yeah, give me a phone call, 310-619-3055.
I do love a gentleman that's brave enough to wear his face and his phone number to his evidence. You inspire me every time, James. Thank you so much, and you have yourself
Thanks for all
a
you
great.
do as well, Wayne. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a privilege. I'm the northern swamp donkey. I just know how to move keyboards around a little bit. I just have the opportunity to talk to some of the smartest people on earth, and I count you among them as the stalwarts for humanity. And there's going to be a day when we're all going to get to celebrate. I'm pretty confident in that. And then I'm overdue for a trip to California.
Thanks for all you do, Wayne. Take care.
My pleasure, James. Bye for now. All right, guys. Wow. So much dynamic information. The guy is absolutely, he walks the talk. He is absolutely approachable. So much information on his Substack, and he's 100% consistent in everything that he says and does, and provides the evidence. And if he is ever mistaken, which I've never really known him to be, he's the first guy that you can talk to about it. So fabulous show. Next Friday, same time, same place, Bryce will be back. So it's back to Bankers, Bandits, Bullion, and Bucks with Bryce. Big event tomorrow for a bunch of us, getting together at noon on Saturday for the Tactical Civics event. Next Wednesday, we've got David Charlambo. That's going to be... he has made such an impact on my ability to do what I do here for you guys every single day, just from a couple of sessions of courses with him. And I've seen so many testimonials and heard from so many people that have also had the opportunity to take some of his programs. The biggest one for me was, people that have gotten their family back because they've been able to navigate the insanity that's being perpetrated on us. And what I learned from him about framing has really, really helped me astronomically with, creating this new version of What's Up Canada, Monday to Friday, 5 days a week. It's kind of more like bookmark chapters every day of the week. I'm so grateful that you guys are here for for all of this, as limited as they make it for us, as difficult as they make it for us. I'm incredibly proud and honored to be able to do what I do for all of you guys. And I do owe a special shout out to Allison and Paul. Thank you so very much for making sure that I've got coffee and craft dinner again for the next little while, and for everybody else that chips in from time to time. I do encourage everybody once again to make sure that you get subscribed on our Substack and James's Substack. There's James's. I will put mine down at the bottom, just underneath there. Jot this down, take a screenshot, guys. You can find my Substack on the whatsupcanada.org. And if there are people that are fighting a good fight for humanity and taking the risks, and they're giving it their all and have made it their lives to fight for you guys, and you trust them, support those guys, whether it's this platform or James's. There are so many out there. Some of them you're going to start finding on lgm.news, but support them all. This is, if you want to support this platform, this is how you do it here. Oh, I'm going to change this, guys. That's too hard to see, I am told. But yeah, Allison and Paul, you guys have helped keep this free for folks for the next little bit. So much gratitude, humble gratitude for you guys. And so yeah, Monday is from the roots. There is so much happening so fast. There's no way that I can begin to predict what Monday's show is going to be about or like, but I'm sure that it's going to be some bombshells. So here's kind of my thinking the last couple of months, guys. I'm literally staring down the barrel of Bill C-63, and when that comes into action, they're going to jail me for the things that I have said and done, for thousands of days now in doing what I do. So there's no escaping that. So I'm going to keep hammering out there the hardest I possibly can until that day comes, or until they silence me. I will continue to be a thorn in their side. I will continue to disrupt the mercenary media. I will continue to call out the corrupted establishment from all sides. Have no loyalty to any political party or any political person. I have yet to find one that passes the ethics, morality, and truth test. So on that note, I will continue to keep digging out bigger, badder, worse stories for everybody. And at the end of the day, I hear it often that I scare the liver out of people. Well, that's not my intent. My intent isn't to scare the liver out of people. My intent is to make your targets clear, to make your energy and your efforts and your investments worthwhile, to give you guys enough information that you're not spinning your wheels, wasting your time and energy and effort. So that's why I do what I do, and I love you guys all so very much. Stay mighty, stay frosty, my fellow patriots and hostages. I'll see some of you tomorrow. Bye for now.